Hello, and thank you for joining this online session about workstations and work tasks. My name's Esme Smith, and I'm an advisory teacher with the EDIT team. The aims of this session are to talk about what a workstation is, how we can introduce them, and the kind of work tasks that work well here. Workstations were originally associated with the TEACH program, which is an American program for teaching children with autism. Um, Workstations are a distraction-free area away from all those sort of social demands and sensory demands where children can go and focus on completing tasks and being as independent as they can be. So when we're thinking about the goals for some of our learners, so even down here in early years, thinking about the adults they're going to grow up to be, we really want our children to be effectively living independently if they can do, accessing the community, perhaps working. And so part of that is learning to be as independent as you can do, and we can really start the foundations of that down in early years. And workstations support that kind of independent learning because they allow processing time. They are incredibly visual, so which is a useful way for children, especially on the autism spectrum, to be able to learn. Um, they limit those sort of sensory distractions and social distractions, so children can really focus on that single channeled attention. And they're predictable and they follow a routine and they are a structured way of teaching, which really then helps children develop those independent skills. Here's an example of what a workstation area might look like. So as I've mentioned before, they are a calm, plain area where the child can work with as minimal distractions as possible. The idea is that the child works from left to right, so you sort of have a start and a finished area. Sometimes we do this as green to red, and it helps children be productive as they can. So you start with your jobs on the left hand side there in your start box or basket or folders, and then when the child has finished the activity, it goes to the right side. In the middle is a nice big area for the child to complete the work task. This is just another example of how it might work. So you might have a stacking system. That works well for if you have children who are working on more than one task. So it might be that they do three tasks whilst they're at their workstation. Or you might have a child who just does one task at their workstation and then they've finished and they go and get a reward or they do whatever's next on their schedule. So it doesn't have to be a stacking system. It can be boxes, baskets, folders, those magazine sort of boxes work well as well. Here are some examples of workstations and work tables that I've taken throughout my teaching practice. So as you can see, they sometimes look a bit different. So one year I had a classroom where we didn't have a workstation, so we used a table and we just set it up with the red and the green baskets. You might have, there's a photo there with a child in it and he has a now and next in front of him. So you might have your visual timetable at the workstation as well. What you will notice is that they are all very plain. The temptation is to make it really exciting and to have photos of that child or photos of things that they like, but it tends to just be distracting. So my best advice would be keep it plain and keep it somewhere quiet and distraction free if you can, even if it is a desk pushed up against a wall and it's a plain wall above them. You'll also see there that one of those tables has a chair for an adult there, and we're going to talk about the role of the adult and how we can help children be independent, because it is something they have to learn and it has to be modelled. They can't just do it straight away. So let's think a bit more in depth about the role of the adult at a workstation. Um, it would be great if a child could go to a workstation and they automatically know how to be independent, but for a lot of children, it takes a lot of adult support and modelling to get to that point, which almost feels counterintuitive at first, but it really does help and set up that child to be able to then work independently on their own. So firstly, I just want to talk about the difference between working together versus working independently. So ideally, when you want a child to be independent at a workstation, the task that they're doing should be something they already know how to do. So it's something you know they can easily do, because what they're learning is to be independent. They're not learning a new knowledge or anything new from the curriculum. The learning intention is about being independent, so that's the focus. So we want to reduce the cognitive load of anything else. If you want to use a distraction-free area like a work table to introduce new curriculum learning, you might want to call that a working together table, and that's something slightly different. But at a workstation, ideally they're there to be working independently. So the adult can sit alongside a child at a workstation and be supporting them be independent. So you're going to be supporting them take out their task, set it up, complete it, and then put it away. Ideally, when you're prompting them, you want to keep verbal language to an absolute minimum. And so actually it might be that you're hand over hand or hand under hand prompting them with gestures rather than using language. And with time, you can then reduce those physical prompts and you can start to move away. But ideally, that's the way we would start it. The kind of tasks that you use at a workstation are really important. So they have to be tasks that have a really clear start and stop. So the child can set up their task and look at it and know exactly when it's finished and when they can put it away and move on to the next one. And you can link them to all sorts of areas and you can differentiate them easily as well. So you'll see here there are some about money, there are some matching ones, pattern ones, sorting. Um, Ideally as well, you would have the you'd work left to right or top to bottom on a task. So you can see here the one that's the 1, 2, 3 numeral ones. You take the pieces from the left and you put them on the right, and that's when it's finished. The one there about big and small teddies, again, you take the pieces from the top and then you put them on the bottom, and that's when you've finished. Here are some more tasks and just some different examples here. So there are some pattern ones there. You can really individualize these for whichever child you're thinking about using the workstation with. And it might be that if your child is working at a lower level, it may be something as simple as an inset puzzle or a shape sorter, or taking a photo of one of their favourite TV characters, cutting it in half, and they have to stick the two halves back together. So think about what might motivate your child and what is at the right level for them. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention on this slide. So it might also be that you have some work tasks that are linked to your child's EHCP targets or some individual learning that you know you want to focus on with them. And I want to talk about when you might use a workstation or a work table, whatever it is you're referring to it as. They are not somewhere for the child to be working at all the time. So they are for short bursts of focused independent learning. So it might be that they go and they spend a few minutes there, or they spend up to 20 minutes there, but then they go back and they work with their peers. That's really important, that children don't become isolated and are at their workstations all the time. It's also something that parents quite often worry about, that their child is always separated from the others. So think about when you're scheduling it in through that child's day and ensuring they have lots of opportunities as well to also be interacting with their peers. So what might progression look like when working independently or working towards being independent at a workstation? So probably, first of all, when you first introduce this, you're going to need full adult support. So you're going to need an adult sitting parallel or alongside that child and hand over hand, supporting them to complete one task, and then the child leaves and they go and have a reward. With time, you might find that that adult can sit next to the child and offer just a little bit of physical prompting to complete one task. And then the next time, the adult might be sat there, but they don't need to do any prompting, they're just sitting there. And then gradually with time, that adult physically moves further and further away. So you start moving slightly behind the child, and then before you know it, you don't need to be there. And then that child can complete one task by themselves and go and have a reward. And then with time, you can build up the amount of tasks that that child is doing. So it might be they do 2 tasks independently and then they go and have a reward, or they do 3 tasks, for example. So again, thinking about when we might use a workstation or an independent working table. So sometimes some of our children find those unstructured times really difficult to access. So when you have your continuous provision or choosing time or special time, it might be that that child finds that really overwhelming and difficult to access. So it may be for some of that time, not all of it, but for some of that time, they come and do some independent work at a workstation which is more structured and more familiar for them. I always like the idea of if the rest of the class are doing maths, that the work tasks you have at your independent work table are also maths related and English when English. I just think it feels more inclusive and it's best practice. You might have a child who finds it really difficult to access those whole class inputs at the carpet, or they can't go to worship and assemblies because they find that too overwhelming, they can't access that. So that might be a good time to do some independent work that is more accessible and more useful for that child. And thinking about children being ready to learn and those behaviours for learning. So it might be that doing some independent work is a way of helping them be ready to learn. And I've mentioned before about perhaps using it as time to for IEP work or to get some focused work done. And we work in schools and preschools, and precious adult time is so hard to come by. So it might be that you have to think really carefully about how you're using your adults. So, like I've mentioned, if that child isn't accessing carpet time, have you got an adult there that can then get some focused learning done at a workstation with a child? Um, or just thinking about that long term goal, when that child is able to be independent, it frees up an adult who can then help other children. So it's really worthwhile for that sense as well. And then I just wanted to mention transition. So, thinking about that transition up to key stage one, being able to sit and focus and work independently is a really important skill to have for children as they move through their educational journey. It's not the be all and end all for us to be preparing our children for key stage one, because it's always best that the teacher of the next class meets the child where they are. Having said that, if they are able to sit and focus and engage on a task, it's a really useful and important starting point for that child. One barrier that I often come up against that people ask me about: what if you have more than one child in your class who could benefit from a workstation? Which really is becoming more and more prevalent in education. So I might visit a classroom and there might be four, five, six children that could really do with a workstation, but there is not the space. Um, so thinking about what you might do then. So it's in that case, I wouldn't name the table as Johnny's table, for example, or little Timmy's table, because if somebody else is then working there, that might cause some conflict and some big feelings. So it might be that your class has a couple of independent working tables, and children can take it in turns to go to that table and use it as a workstation to be independent. So just thinking about how you might manage that in a classroom.